ask, what is the most famous ship of all time? The vast majority of people will say Titanic. I'm pretty sure that you all know the story, so there's no need for me to retell that. If you don't know, although not native to here, I live in Belfast, not far from where the iconic liner was built at Harland and Wolff. The first time I heard of Titanic was when I was about 4 or 5. I was watching the movie A Night to Remember with my mother. I have a very clear memory of having this strange insight, almost mental pictures of what was going to happen next, to which it would have been impossible. I said I wasn't native to here, as I am originally from Birmingham, at least in this present life. However, I've been told that I had a past life in Belfast, where I was actually a workman on the Titanic. While it would explain how I knew back then as a small child, and even felt an uncanny anxiousness watching, the affinity that I have with Belfast, and my morbid fascination with transportation disasters, it's just a theory, which may or may not be true, just like today's story. It involves one of the conspiracies around the fateful ocean liner. The ship and its demise have been shrouded in mystery from the old days. Tales of ghosts, curses and the supernatural. From a book that was written in the 1800s called The Wreck of the Titan, which was pretty much word for word what transpired, to it being a curse due to the White Star Line's refusal to have their ship ceremoniously launched and blessed. The conspiracy I'm looking at has a far more logical and almost believable plot, and given the nature of our human race, more sinister than any ghost or demon. There is a widely speculated and much substantiated, in fact, that the Titanic was in fact a different ship altogether, called the Olympic. The Olympic was the first of 3 sister ships ordered by White Star Line, and it was its flagship. Early on in her life, she had a serious collision, which damaged her starboard side beyond adequate repair. The company was left with a ship less than a year old that by its next inspection was little more than scrap metal. They tried to claim for insurance. As they lost the case and it was deemed their fault, they got nothing. At this time, Titanic was almost built. Many think that the ships were switched, so the new ship became Olympic and the damaged one Titanic. I've examined the case further to see if there is any proof to back this up. A dying seaman who was a member of the crew on the Titanic confessed that he had to clear his conscience, but he had stayed quiet all these years because of threats made to him following the sinking. He said that he knew beyond doubt that the ships were switched, and he also spoke of a fire on board Titanic after it left Belfast. And this part has definitely been declared as true. So why would he have reason to lie about the other part? Every part of a ship is supposed to have a serial number, but apparently with these sister ships, White Star Line had the majority of the stuff simply White Star Line standard issue, so they could have been swapped over without great difficulty. A close relative to someone who worked on Titanic spoke to a Northern Ireland radio station and backed up the old seaman's story that the ships were switched. Photos of differences of portholes on the ships have been studied at length, but as they are so old, it's impossible to say which ship is which in many photos. There is a photo that is meant to be Titanic leaving port that does seem to have the same porthole pattern as Olympic. And to be honest, something as obscure as that would never have been noticed by the average Joe. Olympic, due to her damage, listed slightly to port, and there are numerous reports on that day in Southampton that it was noted that Titanic was leaning to port as she embarked on her only voyage. There are apparently many whispers among the employees, so much so that at a time where a coal strike was ravaging Britain's industrial industry, many of those who signed on at Belfast mysteriously left before Titanic headed towards the Atlantic. Why? No one knows, but it indicates they knew something that spooked them. One of the propeller blades on Titanic was recovered, and it did have the serial number stamped that matched with the correct number for Titanic, not Olympic. But here's the thing. 9 days before the maiden voyage, Olympic was again in Harland and Wolff, getting a propeller blade replaced, so one with Titanic's number on could have easily been used. Some experts claim, though, that time would not have allowed such an elaborate swap, even with the combined days both ships were in the shipyard. J.P. Morgan, the ultimate owner of the company who owned White Star Line, did not board as planned for this monumental voyage, saying he was sick. But he was later seen out and about with his mistress, definitely not unwell. It's interesting too that as a ruthless businessman he had many enemies, several of whom kept their date with fate and died on the ship. But he and other friends did not board. Meanwhile, another ship called the Californian was also docked in Southampton. She had not sailed due to complications with the coal strike, but shortly after Titanic set sail, she was suddenly readied and rushed out with no passengers and little cargo apart from railway sleepers and a couple of thousand woolly blankets and jumpers. A strange cargo indeed. It is said that she was meant to rendezvous with Titanic, or should I say Olympic, after the accident to retrieve the shaken passengers. Now here's for me where it all goes awry. Titanic hit the iceberg and never met the rendezvous point with Californian, who again strangely had dropped anchor somewhere in the middle of the ocean. But Californian saw all the distress signals and repeatedly ignored all of them. They had the opportunity to literally save everyone, but they ignored it. I have a bit of a problem with this, as even if it was not the rendezvous place, or even if the signals were not the ones planned, surely anyone with half a brain would figure that distress calls from a ship they knew was damaged, if they were in on the swap, would have made their way to it with urgency, not hours and hours later. The fact that they did nothing confounds me, whether it was a conspiracy or not. The theorists say that whatever accident took place was not the one planned, and that fate did play a big part in the disaster that unfolded. The iceberg struck exactly where Olympic had makeshift repairs, so if in fact this was Olympic, another impact to that area would have been fatal. Just when I'm about to dismiss all I've heard this far, I see another piece of compelling evidence in favour of the swap theory. James Cameron's team, who went down to the wreck in the making of the blockbuster movie, got footage of the letters M and P on the hull, which is incredible as neither of those letters are in the name Titanic. Even if it was RMS Titanic, there's still no P. I discovered that unusually with Titanic, her name was attached with a plate to the hull as opposed to the normal practice, which is etching the name into the hull. White Star Line received their multi-million payout, and either way it was a terrible and unforgettable tragedy. But in my mind, there is definitely questionable doubt about the real identity of the ship that sank that night. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please give us a like or a share. We'll be back here at the virtual fireside at the same time next week.